Trade Minister Don Farrell's announcement that Australia will maintain just 10% of US tariffs represents a rare diplomatic victory in an escalating global trade war, while other nations face punishment tariff rates up to 50%. Australia secured the lowest possible rate under Trump's new reciprocal tariff regime, potentially saving billions for a key export industry and demonstrating that strategy patience can trump over retaliation. The stakes couldn't be higher. When President Trump signed his reciprocal tariff executive order on July 31st, 2025, 69 countries found themselves facing dramatically increased trade barriers. Australia's achievement of the baseline 10% rate, confirmed by the White House as the lowest available, stands in a stark contrast to economic punishment being imposed on other trading partners. This outcome validates the Albanese government's controversial strategy of refusing to retaliate against US trade measures even as domestic pressure mounted to fight back. The Trump administration's 2025 tariff framework operates like a sophisticated punishment system, with rates determined by trade deficits, perceived unfair practices, and a strategic alignment. Countries that refuse to negotiate or were deemed insufficiently cooperative now face crushing tariff rates. Canada confront 35% of tariffs, Brazil faced 50%, and even close allies like New Zealand received 15% rates. Australia's advantage stems from a unique economic reality. The United States actually runs a $17.9 billion trade surplus with Australia, making it one of the few countries where America's exports more than its import. This structured trade relationship, combined with the AUKUS defense partnership and Australia's measured diplomatic approach, positioned Canberra to avoid the worst outcomes. While steel and aluminium still face cumulative 50% tariffs, most Australian goods flow into the massive US market at the lowest possible rate. The contrast with other nations' experience is striking. China continues to face existing high tariffs plus additional measures, while traditional allies like Canada find themselves in escalating trade conflicts that already reshaping North American commerce. Australia's exports gain critical competitive edge. For Australia's key export sectors, the 10% tariff represents both challenge and opportunity. The country's $5.7 billion red meat trade with Americas faced new costs, but Australian beef now enjoy a massive competitive advantage over Brazilian competitors saddled with 50% tariff. On June 2025, beef export to the US broke all-time monthly record despite the tariff, suggesting strong underlying demand. The wine industry faced more difficult adjustment. Australian wine exports to the US already at two-decade low, declined another 12% in value to $314 million as the 10% tariff particularly impact the commercial wine segments where Australia holds 19% market share. Industry leaders described the impact as disastrous, thought the damage pile compared to what competitors facing higher rates will experience. Australia's dominance in the US lamb import, supplying 80% of all imported lamb, provides some insulation from the tariff impact. The sector achieved a record volume in 2024, and a strong demand for premium protein continues despite price pressures. Wheat producers face minimal direct impact since most Australian grain flows to Asian market rather than United States, highlighting the wisdom of export diversification strategies developed over decades. Strategic non-retaliation proved economic superior. Australia's decision to absorb tariff impact rather than retaliate stands virtually alone among major economies, while China, the European Union, and Canada have imposed retaliatory tariff on American goods, Australia explicitly ruled out such measures. A choice that looked like politically weak but appears economically sophisticated. Economic modeling by the Australian Productive Commission reveals why retaliation would have been a counterproductive. The analysis shows that retaliating will reduce Australia's GDP by 0.14% points while failing to meaningfully pressure the US, giving Australia's relatively small market size. Instead, Australia benefited from trade diversion, effect as other country retaliatory measures make Australian products relatively more competitive. The European Union's targeted retaliation on bourbon, whiskey, and motorcycle creates political pressure in the Pacific US states, while China's aggressive response includes 125% tariff and export control on critical minerals. These approaches make economic sense for largest market that can impose real costs on American companies, but would be self-defeating for Australia. Malaysia, facing 24% US tariff, has similarly avoided retaliation while maintaining projected GDP growth of 4.5 to 5.5%. This emerging model of strategic absorption might represent a new approach for middle power economies navigating great power trade conflicts. AUKUS survived but faced new pressure. The favorable tariff treatment demonstrates that strategic partnership can provide some insulation from economic dispute, but the relationship between the trade and security cooperation grows increasingly complex. Despite trade tension, AUKUS achieved breakthrough progress in 2025 with the establishment of Defense Export License-Free Environment covering 70% of Australia-US defense trade. However, Pentagon demands for increasing Australian defense spending to 3.5% on the GDP compared to Australia's 2.3% commitment by 2032, signal that favorable trade treatment comes with expectation. The June 2025 Pentagon review of AUKUS reflect either preparation to scale back submarine transfer or pressure for greater Australian financial contribution. Foreign policy experts warned that the traditional separation of economic and security partnership is becoming impossible. The Trump administration no longer accepts allies' effort to balance economic relationship with China against defense partnership with America, creating new pressure on Australia's long-standing hedging strategy. Trade Minister Farrell pointed observation that China's trade is almost 10 times more valuable to Australia than US trade illustrate the fundamental economic reality underlying these strategic choices. Managing this tension while maintaining both relationships will define Australian foreign policy for years to come. Limited impact on Australian consumers mask different challenges. The immediate consumers' impact remain modest since tariff costs are primarily borne by the US importers and consumers rather than Australia's exporters. The Reserve Bank of Australia cut interest rate twice in 2025, partly citing tariff uncertainty, but project manageable economic impact under current situations. Australia's diversified trade relationship provide a crucial resilient. The government $50,000 million fund to develop alternative market has shown early success, with VIP export to China rising by 43%, Japan up to 27%, and South Korea increasingly 60%. This alternative combined with currency depreciation that makes Australian export more competitive help offset US market pressures. However, the broader challenge of operating in an increasingly fragmented global trading system pose a long-term risk. As economic and security partnerships become more intertwined, Australia's ability to maintain its pragmatic approach while satisfying alliance obligation will face continued testing. The immediate victory of securing favorable tariff treatment demonstrate that measured diplomacy can succeed even in an era of trade war. But the underlying tension between economic interests and the strategic alignment remain unsolved. Australia's tariff success story offers important lessons about navigating great power competition, strategic patience, recognition of economic realities, and sophisticated alliance management can produce favorable outcomes even in hostile environments. Yet, these achievements occurs within a broader context of fragmenting global trade relationship that will require constant recalibration of Australia's delicate balancing act between its largest economic partner and its most important security ally. This is Miko Santos, and this is Inside OSPO.